What's up, my wizards? It's Deb from Mtg. We like magic, and today I got a list for you that I have agonized over and rewritten like over a dozen times at this point. But I think I'm finally ready to bring it to you. Here are the top 15 cards that get better after rotation. That's right, surprise, it's top 15 list. I told my patrons like last night that this was going to be a top 10 list because I fully intended to be able to whittle the list down to just 10 entries in that time frame. But turns out I couldn't. It's just end of the day there are 15 cards at least that I want to devote some time to in this video. So with that said, I think the only other thing I have to say before we jump in here is just the usual caveat when it comes to like rotation oriented list videos and stuff, is that like we don't know what's going to be in Ravnica, so things could come out in that set and just change all of our perceptions, but we can make rational judgments based on some of the stuff that's leaving, that's maybe been keeping other cards down now for the better part of a year. So with that said, now let's go on to the list and let's start things off with some honorable mentions here. And I just wanted to get a couple of uncommons out of the way. Most of the list, save for a slot or two here and there, are rares and mythics and stuff. So I wanted to devote some time to some uncommons that pretty obviously get better, like Ixalan's Binding, with no cast out, Thopter Arrest. This is just going to be like the de facto go-to way to get this effect on a white card. So I just, like obviously Seal Away costs a couple less mana, but this is the only way we're going to have, the only good way really, to take out, just about any non-land permanent and not have to worry about it anymore. So unless they reprint like Oblivion Ring or something, I'm pretty sure that Ixalan's Binding is going to get slotted into a lot more decks after rotation. And it's already seeing some play, but it's just going to get that much better when it's the only option. Same thing with Lightning Strike, just a little bit of time here because we all know this gets better if Harness Lightning and Abrade rotate out of the format. Again, this is just the only option for this effect unless something else similar gets printed in Ravnica. So I expect Lightning Strike to see even more play because you're not like padding it with a couple of copies of Abrade or a couple of copies of Harness Lightning. It's just going to be 4 straight up copies of Lightning Strike in pretty much every deck that carries mountains. But if there's like a long shot uncommon that I want to talk about for a second before we hit the main list, it's Gutter Snipe. Not only do we already have, Opt and Wizard's Lightning and Shock and Lightning Strike and stuff like that, Chart a Course and Standard, but the Is It Guild is going to be represented in Guilds of Ravnica. They're going to do 5 in the first set, the other 5 in the second set. And the first set that comes out this fall has the Is It Guild in it, so we're probably going to see some really juicy, spicy stuff to go with Gutter Snipe. So it's a little bit of a swing for the fences. Gutter Snipe's not the best card in the world or anything, but it could definitely get some supplemental pieces to make it way better in the fall. But we've hit the main list, so let's get on with it. Number 15, Captain Lannery Storm. And this was originally in my top 10, but it slid down a ways because I understand this isn't like the most realistic pick on the list to do like way better after rotation. But I think it gets a little bit better in a world without on-crop crashers and P&A Lars and other good ways to fill out the 3-drop slot aside from Goblin Chain Whirler. I mean, she's an aggressive option. I like that about her. Again, she's no on-crop, but she's the next best thing in a world without on-crop crasher. Plus, an ongoing theme that I may bring up multiple times in this video is that the mana gets much worse after rotation. Now, there's probably going to be a cycle of rare dual lands in Ravnica. I'd bet some money on that, but we lose 2 cycles of rare dual lands. We lose fast lands and bicycle lands. So even if Ravnica has a cycle of duels, it could still be argued that the mana gets worse. Things like Captain Lannery Storm and other treasure producers might actually be a little bit more desirable in a world where we're just trying to fix our mana in any way possible. Like Lannery Storm could be a really reliable way of casting a Nikal Bolas on the next turn. That's definitely worth bringing up. But moving along here, my number 14 is Grand Warlord Rada, if only because I think there's a slim chance this could replace Hazaret in a really aggressive list. And Green-Red is actually looking pretty decent after rotation. It's still got a lot of good pieces, a lot of aggressive stuff, a lot of big monsters. So I like the idea of Green-Red, and if that deck is trying to be as aggressive as possible, then you could do a lot worse than Grand Lord or Warlord Rada at the 4-drop slot. I have played with this card before in a couple of decks now, a Green-Red Elves deck and then a Mox Amber-oriented Legends build. And she's really shined in both decks, This is a really, really fast card. It has some importance the turn it hits the board. It can sometimes allow you to double or triple spell, you get the Rada, and then either during your combat step or after your combat step, you can end up having another 2 to 4 mana to cast spells with and stuff. So you can just explode onto the board while also doing damage that turn. Like, Rada is a really decent card if they don't have something to answer or the turn she comes down and you've still got a couple of spells in your hand. So I've really liked when Radha's been on the board in my time with her. So in a world without things like, Fatal Push to kill her for 1 mana or whatever, then I think she just gets way, way better. Now, my number 13 is Muldrotha, and I really want this to be a better card come rotation, but it's really hard to sell me completely on 6-drop creatures in Standard, especially ones that don't really do anything to affect the board outside of being big fat dudes the turn that they come out. So I'm not completely sold on Muldrotha, but I do think it's interesting that the Golgari Guild is going to be well represented in Guilds of Ravnica. It's going to be one of the 5 guilds that we get to see in this first Ravnica set, and the Golgari are typically focused around graveyard shenanigans and stuff, and they're in Muldrotha's colors, so I think we could see some really funky pieces to go with Muldrotha. So I wanted to devote some time to talk about her here because, again, 6-drops are hard to play in Standard a lot of the time, but it does look like the format could lose another half step after rotation at least without, red-black being the best deck in the format or mono-red being one of the best decks in the format. It looks like with red losing so many pieces, maybe the format loses another half step. If that happens, 6-drops are a little bit more palatable, and Muldrotha might get her foot in the door. But number 12, Elves. Because it rhymes and I wanted to do that, I thought it was cute. But also, I think it should be kind of high up on the list, because I think getting like a good top 5 spot on the list takes a card that was kind of bad before rotation, but becomes way better after rotation. And Mono Elves is already good. Like, Mono Green is already one of the best decks in the format, so it's not like this gets much better, but Mono Green looks to be the king of the mountain after rotation. If everything we know holds true. Mono Green is going to be a really good deck, and it's still going to have Elves and a Steel Leaf Champion. It's still going to have Galta. It's going to have Giganosaurus. It's going to have Vinemare. That deck really doesn't look to get much worse after rotation. So Mono Elves is just going to get that much better, but it was already pretty good. So I'm not going to put it in the top 3. We'll put it over here, like sub-top 10. But my number 11 is Weatherlight, or it should be the Weatherlight. Bugs the crap out of me that this is just Weatherlight. There should really be a V in there. But anyway, ranting aside, I think this is just going to be like the best vehicle in the format, hands down, after rotation. No Ethersphere, no Heart of Kieran, no junk like that. So I'm pretty sure, all things considered, this is the best vehicle in the fall. So there's that. Plus, there's no Abrade, which I'll probably point out more than once in this video. I already have, as a matter of fact. But no Abrade not only is better for smaller, 3 toughness or less creatures, but it's really good for expensive-ish artifacts. Things that cost 4 or 5 mana are especially affected by Abrade, because if they get abraded, it gives the opponent a ton of mana value, which basically translates to tempo. They take away your turn 4 or 5 play and still get to play something else, putting them ahead on board. So not having Abrade in the format really helps expensive artifacts like the Weatherlight and maybe a couple of other things we'll look at on the list. But here we are in the top 10, and I'll start things off here with Hostage Taker. I really want this card to be better after rotation, but I think there are definitely good rational arguments for why it does get better. You'll never have to worry about this getting hit with Revolted Fatal Push ever again. I think that regular 4-drop creatures that don't have Indestructible or Hexproof or anything like Vinemare, just regular old run-of-the-mill 4-drop creatures are much better after rotation just because Fatal Push rotates out. I've already touched on that with Radha, but I think Hostage Taker benefits from it a little bit more. There's no Abrade to take this out. There's no Harness Lightning to take this out at a mana value, so all of that makes this a much better card. And conversely, sort of, the exact opposite is that in a world with less removal, we're not going to have, again, Fatal Push, Abrade. There's less desirable removal in the upcoming format. This becomes pretty decent removal in and of itself. Now, my number 9, I'm going to cheat just a little bit because I couldn't decide which 2-drop artifact I like more, but I like Treasure Map and Somatic Compass even more after rotation. And these are already somewhat played cards, especially Treasure Map in sideboards. And Somatic Compass occasionally, you'll see it pop up. But in any case, these are already somewhat played cards. And after Kaladesh block rotates, we lose an entire, block that's centered, focused around artifacts. So I think these will just become the de facto best 2-drop artifacts in the format, along with maybe Azor's Gateway, but I think these are just better choices overall for most decks that want 2-drop artifacts. And there's still going to be decks that need artifacts. There's a lot of artifact payoffs that remain in the format. We're still going to have Psy Master Thopters. Karn is still around, Antiquities War, so there's still a lot of desirable Tezzeret, There's still a lot of desirable artifact payoffs that remain in the format, and there's probably going to be a few artifact decks that want to pop up. So with that in mind, I think that we're going to still be looking for great 2-drop artifacts, and these have always been just that. It's just that we won't have things like Servo Schematic, Cogworker's Puzzle Knot, which are on their face, just in a vacuum, worse cards than these, but tend to work way better for the improvise type decks. We won't have to worry about improvise, won't even be a thing after rotation, but decks that still want artifacts will still want really good, cheap artifacts, and these are definitely that. Plus, arbitrary mention, though, we won't have a Braid in the format to kill these for 2 mana. So I've already talked about a Braid a bunch of times in this video, but it is going to impact the format tremendously that a Braid leaves, and these are 2 more cards that get better because we don't have to worry about them getting abraded. They just, artifacts in general will slot into main decks. Way better, you won't sweat about an abrade in game 1 anymore. So with that in mind, artifacts in general get better. And I'm probably going to bring up a Braid. Well, actually, I'm definitely going to bring up a Braid again in this video because my number 8 is also kind of made much better by the fact that a Braid leaves the format, and that's Vanquisher's Banner, and to a lesser extent, Radiant Destiny, or maybe to a greater extent, Radiant Destiny, My bottom line here is that there's going to be more tribal after rotation. Zombies is already a thing, but Goblins is probably going to be the best red deck. I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but we may also see a resurgence in tribes like Knights, Merfolk, Vampires. There's a lot of tribes that are chomping at the bit since Ixalan, like a year ago, that have been wanting to be decks, but there's always been a broken Heart of Kirin deck that's just way better. So, something like that. So, I think that we may see way more tribal play after rotation, what makes cards like these way, way better. Metallic Mimic's not going to be a thing. So if you want another power boosting sort of anthem effect for your tribal deck, these are going to be your other best options. And again, in a world without a Braid, a card like Vanquisher's Banner, a 5-mana artifact, gets much, much better. So I think we'll probably see a lot more of these post-rotation. Now, my number 7 is Regisaur Alpha, believe it or not. I think this gets way better post-rotation. I don't think that Green-Red Dinosaurs is necessarily looking like the best list, I don't think Ripjaw Raptor gets that much better because we've got Rekindling Phoenix, we've got Vine Mare. They're just much better 4-drops than Ripjaw Raptor, even after rotation. So I think we're looking at a Green-Red Monsters deck. But in that deck, Regisaur Alpha is just like the best 5-drop, or like one of the best 5-drops. We lose Glorybringer, we lose Verdurous Gearhulk too, So if you're looking for a 5-drop in that deck, it's either Demanding Dragon or it's this. And I would argue for the Green-Red Monsters deck, this is much, much better. It performs better against cards like, just 1-for-1 removal. A lot of people are going to be playing. It performs better against Settle the Wreckage, because you don't have to swing with both of them if you don't want to. I just think that putting more value onto the battlefield, putting 2 guys on the battlefield is going to be much, much better post-rotation. And this puts all the power in the world and a bunch of value. The token has haste. All your other dinosaurs have haste. Token has trample. It's just all the stats and benefits to this have always been self-evident, but in a format with fewer good 5-drops, or at least fewer ridiculous bomb 5-drops, I don't think anyone would argue that Verdurous Gearhulk and Glorybringer are 2 of the best 5-drops Standard has seen in a really good long time. So without stuff like that clogging up the red-green deck, Regisaur Alpha is looking a lot better. Now, my number 6 is Lyra Don Bringer, believe it or not, and that's mostly because of one card leaving the format, and that's Unlicensed Disintegration. One of the reasons that Red-Black became such a popular deck in the first place is that Unlicensed is such an embarrassing answer to Lyra, Nice 5-drop you just tapped out there for, buddy. How about you take a bolt to the face and get that thing out of there? My turn, sweet, swing for lethal. Unlicensed Disintegration is just the most disgusting answer to a Lyra Don Bringer, and without it in the format, Lyra Don Bringer looks a whole lot better just by a factor of that. If for no other reason, Unlicensed not hanging around makes Lyra way, way better, because there's nothing worse than playing your Lyra against a board full of aggro, thinking you can lean back, take a deep breath, and then they just end of turn Unlicensed it. That hurts so badly, and they almost always swing for lethal right after that. So without that play in the format, Lyra just looks literally 100 times better. It cannot be understated or overstated how good Lyra is without Unlicensed in the format. So there's that, but this is also like probably the best 5-drop in the format in terms of pure stats now. And after the rotation, I don't see that changing anytime soon. You know, it just busts Rekindling Phoenix in the face in the air. It's just gross against Rekindling Phoenix. So there are a lot of good reasons why Lyra should be good right now, but Unlicensed Disintegration is one of the big reasons why it's not. But you know, another card that I think benefits from there being no gods in the format, no indestructibles, no scarab gods, nothing like that, but also benefits from Unlicensed Disintegration leaving the format, is Ravenous Chupacabra. You know, Ravenous Chupacabra now becomes like the default best answer to a Lyra Don Bringer. Like, I guess you could just play Murder or something, but I'd much rather answer the Lyra Don Bringer for less mana and put a body on the battlefield. Just 2-for-1 them, you know? This looks like, post-rotation, one of the best answers to Lyra and a bunch of other good creatures, again, with no gods or, you know, anything like that, any nonsense like that in the format that's indestructible or just keeps coming back no matter how many times you kill it. Ravenous Chupacabra just looks so much better. People are going to have to revert to, quote, normal creatures and also Rekindling Phoenix. You know, this isn't any better against Rekindling Phoenix post-rotation, but there are going to be a lot more just normal creatures, you know, after rotation. And a format like that makes for a much better Chupacabra. My only real hang-up with this is I'm not sure how amazing black decks are going to be in the first place after rotation, because Vinemare is probably going to be a really important card. And by the way, Vinemare is something else this can't kill because it's got the hexproof. That kind of sucks. And Vinemare swings straight through without caring at all. So I'm not super sold on black post-rotation, if only because Vinemare is such a gross card. But if black decks are important, Ravenous Chupacabra is probably going to be the best 4-drop they can play. Now, my number 4 kind of surprised me, to be honest with you, but it's up here because I think objectively this is going to see way more play in the fall. And that's Sarkhan Fireblood. I know, it's weird, right? But this just easily becomes the most reliable, consistent way to cast a Nicol Bolas. On the next turn, you don't even have to drop a land, and you'll still have mana left over after you cast your Nicol Bolas the next turn. Like, this is a really good way of getting what will be maybe the best 4-drop creature in the format down on turn 4. So I really like the idea of Sarkhan post-rotation. Plus, you know, I've already said we're probably going to have, you know, more graveyard stuff because Golgari is going to be a guild in Guilds of Ravnica. So we might see some sort of Jund-oriented Dragons deck that wants to reanimate things or get stuff out of the graveyard. Pure speculation, but in that case, Sarkhan can also fuel graveyard strategies, and just rummaging for you is good enough in some cases. So I mostly think this gets way better because of the second ability, but the first ability isn't bad to begin with, and in a format where we may see graveyard-oriented decks, it only gets that much better. Plus, the Ultimate has definitely proven itself in multiple games for me at this point, so Ultimate is relevant too, and in a slower format, I've already touched on that. I think the format may, arguably, lose a half step with red not being the deck that it once was. And if that happens, then again, that's much more inviting a format for cards like Sarkhan. But we're in the top 3 here, and my number 3 is Cleansing Nova. And this one's pretty obvious, honestly. It just straight up replaces Fumigate unless we see a better white sweeper in the next set, you know. But I really don't know that we will. You know, nobody knows that we will, but this is a good enough white sweeper in the interim. You know, every deck's going to be playing Settle the Wreckage in the first place. You know, every control deck is, but most control decks are going to need a secondary, you know, a tertiary, an auxiliary sweeper. And this is definitely going to do the trick for pretty much every blue-white control deck, which is still looking to be pretty good in a format where Teferi is maybe the single best card after rotation. Blue-white control is still going to be a deck, and it's going to need its 5-mana sweeper. Cleansing Nova is right there against the creature-based decks, and it's going to be pretty good in a mid-range format with lots of green and stuff. You know, I could see Cleansing Nova being a ridiculous card. It answers Vinemare. There's all sorts of reasons why Cleansing Nova is going to see play outside of just, well, Fumigate rotates. You know, it's also really good against artifact decks, which could be a thing. I've already mentioned there's still a ton of artifact payoffs after rotation. So if artifact decks are still a thing, a pretty good card against them. Plus, there's still lots of enchantments, History of Benalia, other sagas and stuff like that. There's Seal Away and Ixalan's Binding against sort of the mirror match, other white decks that play enchantment removal. And I guess another, notch in the belt here is that Selesnya is going to be a guild in Guilds of Ravnica, and Selesnya really likes to play around with enchantments. So if they do a lot of enchantment-based stuff, Satyr Enchanter may have been a sort of dog whistle, a breadcrumb, if you will, that they're going to do some more enchantment-based stuff in Selesnya. And if they do that, then obviously Cleansing Nova gets a lot better against all those enchantments. So just because of the versatility on this card, I think it's going to get way better past rotation. But mostly, this is a function of Fumigate leaving the format and this being the only good replacement. But I'm really swinging for the fences with number 2, but I think I can justify it, or at least I have justified it to myself, but you can do that with just about anything. But we'll see how many people agree with me. My number 2 is Patient Rebuilding Hold. At least let me explain myself first. Now, to a lesser extent, I guess Psychic Corrosion could also be my number 2, but that seems really, really silly. Patient Rebuilding is a much better card, and the reason that it's here in the first place is I've already mentioned that Blue-White is probably still going to be a good deck after rotation. Again, Teferi is just maybe the single best card in the entire format, just in terms of, base power level. It is the Goku of the format, so I don't think Blue-White's going anywhere anytime soon, but it's going to need a good win condition. We lose Torrential Gearhulk. In Esper decks, we lose the Scarab God. Now, Esper could definitely use Chromium as another win condition, but that looks like more of a mirror breaker than a straight win condition for a control deck. It costs way too much mana, even with the Flash. So I'm not sure about Chromium. But there's also, we lose Approach of the Second Sun. That was a really good win condition in Blue-White. And so I think that Patient Rebuilding might actually be the way to go. Now, you can always just go the super long route, the troll route of just winning off of Teferi, tucking himself into your library over and over, and eventually just deck the opponent. But if you're going to do that, then Patient Rebuilding really speeds up your rounds and helps make sure you don't go to times, or at least there's that. Draws you a bunch of cards in the meantime, just buries the opponent in advantage. So I could actually see Patient Rebuilding being a much, much better card after rotation, especially if the Bant Turbo Fog deck sticks around. This is actually not a bad option as a one-of for that deck to, again, make sure that you speed things up, because those decks, Blue-White Control and Turbo Fog, really tend to go to time an awful lot. If you don't want that to happen so often, Patient Rebuilding is a good way of speeding up the inevitable. And if anything benefits from a slower format, it's Mill. I keep facing the Blue-White Mill deck on Arena, which looks a little bit casual at first glance, but it's actually just a straight-up, hardcore Blue-White control deck with really expensive stuff, It just happens to play Psychic Corrosion and Patient Rebuilding, and that deck comes really, really close to killing me all the time, and has killed me a couple of times in the past. And in a slower format, I could definitely see that deck getting the step that it needs to actually finish games off consistently. So I know it seems like a crazy thing to say, but Patient Rebuilding could maybe be the most improved card, possibly after rotation. But my number 1 is another 5-drop. There have been a few 5-drops on this list, but this time it's red, and you might think that you know what it is. You might think it's Demanding Dragon, and Demanding Dragon you could definitely make an argument for. I've already mentioned it a couple of times in this list, but it's actually not the red 5-drop I think improves the most with rotation. I think Siege Gang Commander is going to be my number 1 this time around, mostly because Goblins will be the face of Mono Red. If Mono Red is still a deck, if it's not completely left in shambles, if it tries to pick up the pieces at all, a lot of those pieces are going to have goblin heads. So I really think that Siege Gang Commander just becomes the premier red 5-drop in the format post-rotation. And there are multiple reasons for that. This is a lot of bodies for 5 mana, a lot of power for 5 mana, but most notably, it gives you a way to win without having to attack. It gives you a way to win without swinging into that Settle the Wreckage that you fear so much, and it gives you a way to win against the Bant Turbo Fog decks that want you to just swing in for combat damage. If you've got enough open mana, you can eventually grind them out with the Siege Gang Commander and a bunch of goblins. So there's that too. And I also think, this is speculation, I will admit that, but I also think we're getting a lot of signals for some sort of value engine that's coming up in the near future. There are a ton of goblins that sack for value. There's Skirk Prospector sacks things for value, Trash Master sacks things for value, Siege Gang sacks things for value, Dark Dweller Oracle, all of these are great goblins, but they all sacrifice goblins for value. So I think that we may be, seeing some signals for some sort of graveyard-based value engine that'll bring our goblins back after we sacrifice them, or maybe some sort of aristocrat strategy that we can exploit. I really think we're seeing a lot of signals for that. So we may not see it in the next set. We may have to wait for the Rakdos Guild in the next Ravnica set. But at some point, I think we're going to see some sort of value engine. But again, that's all speculation. The other reasons I've pointed out for Siege Gang becoming a much better card post-rotation are all completely valid in my eyes. Being able to get around Settle the Wreckage is good enough in and of itself. But if this Turbo Fog deck is really still a thing, which all they have to do is like print another Fog, and it remains a thing, So if that's still an oppressive deck or trying to be a real deck in the format, then having a way to, kill them without actually having to attack them is extremely important. So I think Siege Gang is seriously my number one. This is oscillated between like number 1 and number 3 a few times, but seriously, I think if Mono Red is going to try and be a deck at all post-rotation, this is going to be one of the more important pieces in the whole list. But I'm pretty sure that's my list. I'm tapped out for this one. Make sure you take to the comments section. Let me know how dumb I am. Let me know what I missed, because I know there are 100 cards that everyone thinks will get better. Everyone's got their top 50, So let me know what I missed down there in the comment sections and get at me. So aside from that, just do the YouTube stuff on your way out. Like the video, share the video. That helps me a lot. And this is information that may need to be shared around. Get this out there. Share it. Just if only to help me out. And aside from that, what else? I'm hoping to get this video out. I should probably tell you about this, because this is a weird story, but just before I leave, I'm hoping to get this video out Sunday, so hopefully that happens. But right now, I actually don't have any internet. I've been using like wireless hotspots to, talk to my patrons and stuff. So I'm going to get this edited right after I recorded, but I'm not sure when it's actually going up because I don't have internet. We were hit by a denial of service claim. It's basically a hack. My apartment was literally actually hacked. It's from a Chinese IP address. We know it's a hack. We don't know if they're targeting me specifically or my household specifically for whatever reason. But it's definitely, we know what it is. We've seen the logs. So that's crazy. And the solution was supposed to be to go out and get a new modem and router. We did that, and it has not fixed anything. So we've got a technician coming out to look at things today. Like right after I finish recording this, I'm going to try to edit it, but that's around the time the appointment is. So hopefully the technician will be able to figure something out and give us some internet, but if not, I guess I'll just have this up as soon as possible, and you guys think of me, Hope I'm not much of a praying man myself, but if you are, pray for me. Because I need internet to do this for you guys and to make a living. So hope for me that I get the internet back. That would be great. But aside from that, just do all the stuff. Click the link in the description to go to TCG Player. They helped me out. They really are good sponsors of the channel, and I picked them as my sponsor because they are the lowest place to get any Magic cards on the internet. So make sure you check out their wares. You can pre-order, Guilds of Ravnica stuff. You can go ahead and get Commander 2018 stuff. Just click the link in the description, because the more clicks that link gets, the more it helps me out. So do all that if you want to. Follow me on Twitter at SBMTGDev. Throw $1 into the Patreon if you want to. Link in the description for that one. And I'm pretty sure that's all I got for this one. So I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizard. Subscribe. I missed that. Make sure you subscribe. We're almost at 94,000. Trying to get to that big 100K. That's going to be like the best Christmas present ever. Get me to 100K. I'd really appreciate that. I want that dumb play button. I'm going to put it right there on the wall. So help me out if you possibly can. Subscribe to the channel. And now I'm done with the call to action, and I'll catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind.